Hello and welcome to the Apple Insider Podcast. Our sponsor this week is 1Password. William's away, but I have another guest with me. I'm going to be joined by Mike Worthley, our managing editor at Apple Insider. And I think to start off this week, we're going to have a little discussion about that Apple Vision Pro review, which has finally published. What's going on over there, Mike?
Hey, yeah, anyway, hello, everybody. You've got me again this week. If you don't like it, there's always other podcasts you can listen to, or skip forward to next week's, or go back to last week's, whichever you prefer. So Apple Vision Pro, right? Apple Vision Pro, Vision OS 2.0 is out, and it changes the hardware a little bit, but not a lot. There are improvements. I'm a little hesitant to say that this is a big jump from 1.0 because I don't really feel like it is. So what we still have left is we've got a $3,500 headset that sells routinely for $2,200 on eBay because of lack of interest. And you really have to be the devout and the faithful to really buy into this at this point. There's, to me, and to the enterprise folks I've talked with, there's still a lot that the hardware should do but isn't doing and maybe can't do.
This is a difficult device to talk about as far as exactly what's going on from Apple's perspective because they are just not talking about it. It's weird. There's not even really any ads for Apple Vision Pro, funny enough, right? We're not seeing them mid-rolls in YouTube, or they're not showing up on television commercials as far as I can tell. I don't really watch TV, but it's just not really coming up. So how is Apple pushing this product? That was my focus on this review, but you took it from more of an enterprise standpoint. They can't really do a whole lot with the Apple Vision Pro, and Apple seems to be targeting the same segment, at least from the enterprise as the HoloLens, right? With the mixed reality type computing.
Yes and no. HoloLens was an interesting product. I actually have a fair amount of experience with HoloLens from the same people that I spoke with in enterprise about it. And they weren't super happy with HoloLens, not specifically because of the hardware, because it also seemed like an afterthought from Microsoft. It seems like something that Microsoft just kind of, in the day, just kind of tossed it out there and said, okay, go. Which is not that dissimilar from what Apple's doing, right? They're kind of hoping that the developers will come up with a killer use case and the killer app that hasn't developed. There's concern about a lack of access to cameras. There's a concern about lack of full access to telemetry from the device. There's concerns about processing power, why it's the M2 and not the M3. They're fine with the RAM. They like the cameras. They like the field of view. They like the audio. There's concern about battery runtime. Like, they would really like a way that there can be a battery in between the Apple Vision Pro battery and the external battery so you don't have to tether with USB-C power. So there's a lot of situations here that enterprise is just kind of saying, well, okay, well, we've got them. Now what? And right now, through most of the people I've talked to, is they got the hardware, so Apple's obviously got their money. But what they don't have is they don't have a good solution for what to do with the hardware now that, in some cases, they've spent upwards of $1 million on getting hardware.
Right. This is just such a weird product. I mean, I don't think we've seen something like this from Apple before in the way they're rolling it out and the way they're not exactly talking about it. I think the closest parallel would be the HomePod. They just kind of threw that thing out there, gave software updates. Sometimes they'd mention it at keynote, sometimes they wouldn't. But this one, it's definitely very much an evangelist. Not an evangelist device. It's a fan device. Like, this is, if you have the money, you're going to go buy it because it's an Apple product. It doesn't seem like there's a market outside of that, and it's the usual Apple problems. We've heard these complaints before about different products. Is there enough power, right? There was a time when iPad and iPhone would be compared to Android because Android would have double the RAM on their devices, but the software stack kind of counter-argued that. But Apple Vision Pro isn't doing that because developers just aren't there. There isn't a financial support structure. The guy who made Widgetsmith said he made basically no money on Apple Vision Pro, and that's a huge app. Now, the applicability of such an app on Apple Vision Pro is questionable, so maybe there's an issue there as well, but we're looking at stuff like there's no hardware controllers, so apps like Beat Saber could almost not exist because it would be a very odd game to just be waving your hands around with no haptic feedback. There's just these little tidbits that it's a lot of learning Apple's doing right now, and maybe that's what they need. They needed to get this on the market. I'm still of the idea that this needed to release to answer these questions. But I guess my question for you, Mike, is what if you were designing this in Apple's lab or on the evangelist team, what is Apple doing wrong, and what could they do to make this product a hit or make people at least care about it more than they are?
Well, this is a chicken and the egg situation, right? Apple fully knows that they need full developer support for this, and yet they are still limiting sensor access on the hardware. Why would you do that? You have all these sensors on this device. Why would you tell developers, oh, you can use these 4, but not these 9?
Yeah, scary privacy.
Yeah,
stuff,
but it's
right.
That's not really a scary privacy thing, right? Your phone is still in the room. It's not like that isn't a source of hoovering up every piece of information potentially that you're putting on the internet, right? There's no more privacy concerns with the Apple Vision Pro than there are with the iPhone.
Right. It's such a weird problem. I wonder exactly what the internal communications on Vision Pro looks like, because from the developer side of things, any podcast I listen to, any commentary I see on social media, it's very negative. It's just withdrawn completely. They're not even considering this product. There are some popular apps that are just now getting to a year of its release, almost 2 years since its announcement, where they're finally discussing maybe we should look into Vision OS. Maybe it's just the problem of it being an early product. The early adopter phenomenon has always been a thing. I mean, there's been platforms that come into existence with nothing, and then they have to crawl up or fail. And I guess my question is Apple Vision Pro, can it fail? Is there a future where Apple just says, never mind, we're not going to do spatial computing? Or
No.
are they just kind of on the path?
No, Apple's got enough money to wait forever for something, right? When Apple TV Plus rolled out, it cost billions of dollars for the very few programs that they had on it. And it didn't matter that it wasn't going to turn a profit for ages. Same thing happened with Apple TV, right? There was this huge discussion about why the original Apple TV hardware existed. And for folks like me who are playing video on a Mac Mini attached to a huge CRT television in this very room that I'm recording, it was a visionary product for that segment of the populace. So does Apple have a long-term vision for this? No pun intended. Yeah, I'm sure they do. Is it obvious to us right now? It is not. So, you know, while I am mostly negative on the hardware, I do see that there's potential. But Apple's going to have to decide that they're going to want to open that potential to developers. And if they don't, then the product's going to be there's going to be a second RAN. It's going to be an also RAN in the market. And obviously Meta's thrilled, right? Because they sell headsets for an order of magnitude less than the Apple Vision Pro sells for. And obviously they're not quite the same specs, clearly. But this is an 80-20 rule. You get 80% of the product for 20% of the cost. So maybe in this case, and 80% of the product for that 20% of the cost is what the doctor ordered.
Right. And the other side of the coin here, it's not just cost, it's not just comfort, it's not just, use case, it's evangelism.
Mm-hmm.
Apple just isn't talking about this product, and it's kind of strange. Even WWDC, where we were, hopeful Vision OS 2 would correct all the things, and it did, they had to move past it because Apple Intelligence was the future, and that, at least in that moment, not Apple Vision Pro, and it felt like it kind of took a back seat. Now, I know that's not going to be the case going forward. They could have a separate event even just for Vision Pro. We're seeing some new releases on different bits of entertainment. The Marvel What If won an Emmy for interactive platform or whatever. That's cool. Like that, I'm glad that there is things happening here, but it is at such a glacial pace. I think maybe we're spoiled by how quickly things move in iPhone world, that we aren't used to dealing with a new product. I mean, the last time we dealt with a truly new product was the Apple Watch, and it still took off at a much faster pace than this. So maybe Apple's own fervor around its own products have spoiled us on this, and we're maybe being a little too hard. But I agree, the use case is very limited, and it's limited to people with money. So you're just carving a niche out of a niche at that point. And while they haven't sold that many, and the developers aren't making that much money, I'm with you. The promise of the platform is there, and I think growth is inevitable. It's just what is Apple going to do to help promote that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a HTC Vive and in the Steam VR setup. I forget what it's called right at the moment. I think it's actually called Steam VR, and
Right.
they're okay. You know, their gaming headsets are designed to be tethered to a beefy ass PC, which
I have
which
this
I have.
failed PSVR 2.
Yep, you get the PSVR
and
2. That's right.
It's doing the same thing every headset does, and Sony's kind of backing off because they ran into the same issue. Facebook, Sony has plenty of money for sure, but Facebook has more money, and they can just let Oculus circle the drain for a decade, kind of like Apple can just let Vision Pro do the same if they needed to. Sony, they're more profit-oriented about their hardware, so PSVR 2 not doing it for them is enough for them to just say, we're done. They're actually just ramping down production, and we might see a PSVR 3, but at this point, it's doubtful. Maybe they seem to be leaning to the PC crowd. Apple, I suggested in a hardware improvement on the last episode of a future iteration of Apple Vision Pro to help with cost and iteration. If Apple could separate the compute unit from the interaction unit, so sensors, camera stack, screen stack on one side, compute unit on the other, maybe at the other end of that tether, as you discussed, and putting power in between and all of that, maybe taking some of the weight and heat off of the headset as well. We could see a lot of different directions this could go in, and of course the inevitability of the Apple glasses is coming, but that's going to need its own revolution in computer hardware. We're always a decade away from that, it feels like. So I don't know. I'm hopeful for the future of this product. I mean, the review is mostly still positive. I lowered the score a bit because Apple hasn't moved it forward enough in the last 6 months. I'm just curious what the conversation is going to look like at 1 year in February.
Yeah, that's really the question, right? I don't think we're expecting any mass revisions to the hardware or software in between, right? Unless there are Vision OS 2 features that haven't been announced, which wouldn't surprise me.
There's a glimmer there. Someone, I can't remember who, but social media as it is, said they did a secret Apple briefing. And of course, usually when that happens, they're never going to do it again. But they announced that they did a secret Apple briefing and they saw Vision OS features that no one's seen yet. So whatever, take that as you will, who knows. But it's from a source that I generally wouldn't make this up. But yes, cool, I guess. Hidden Vision OS 2 features. But that still doesn't bring developers to the table as far as I know. So that's the problem. We need stuff on the platform.
Yeah. Right now, it is functionally an iPad tethered to your face,
which I'm fine with, of course, if anyone knows me. But I think for it to sell, it needs more. I mean, I'm the niche customer who had happened to have enough money to buy it. That's not enough, especially at Apple's scale. I mean, we see them canceling TV shows because their millions of views weren't enough for them to care. Right? It's different part of the company, of course, but it's just interesting to see how they make decisions here. Like I said, I don't think Vision Pro is going anywhere as far as
I don't think so either.
Like Vision OS is here to stay. The next headset could be very different, or it could be it's already so far down the pipeline, honestly, and sure, it could even be a 2026 release. I don't think we're going to see a huge divergence from what we're seeing now. Could be lighter, could be a little less expensive, probably not, depending on what they do to it. But that iteration's still coming. I mean, but I wouldn't give up on this one yet. We're going to have it for quite a while, and I think Apple knows that. But maybe they also know they're not going to sell that many even before the second iteration comes out. Maybe that's why the emphasis isn't there.
I wouldn't be surprised to see an M4 version pop out sometime next year. Just one day in a press release. So, hey, Apple Vision Pro now has M4.
All right, so let's move on from Apple Vision Pro. I think we got plenty of iPhone 16 news. We are getting closer and closer. You're starting to feel the heat a little bit, starting to sweat. That's going to be a very busy couple of weeks for us, a couple months really.
Wes. This is my 15th iPhone event.
Oh, of course.
And that's internet facing, 15th. And obviously, at some level or other, I covered them all for in private before then for the federal government. So I have done some kind of production of text since the very first iPhone event. So am I sweating the iPhone 16? No. Are we going to be busy? Oh, yes.
Sure. busy is never a bad thing, I don't think.
No, I agree.
For me, I think it's my fourth since I've been here. So I'm excited. iPhone 16. It's weird. I don't know if it's just time's caught up with me or I've just been too busy, but iPhone 16's kind of snuck by me. How are you feeling on your end? Is there just less rumors, or is there just less to be excited about this time around? Is this going to be more of an iterative update?
So this is the Apple Intelligence update, right? This is to make sure that all of the devices, top to bottom, for the 2024 phones can use Apple Intelligence. That's what this is about. I'm not expecting... I mean, there's that capture button that's talked about, but that's not particularly for me. I think for iPhone photographers, it'll make a difference.
I think that could be an interesting piece of hardware. I was thinking about it now. This could be chaos too, but if you have an interactive slidable component on the side of the phone, theoretically you could use it to scroll.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
Right. Like there's all kinds of fun little things. Pro photo apps could go crazy with the 3 or 4 different gestures that it could offer. Apple's own photo app is going to have to get much more complicated, which is excited for me. Like, even though the hardware will be interesting, that means that's a big deal for Apple's software. And the more Apple can add to the camera app, I think the better, because it's one of their most important apps.
I'm kind of on the opposite side of that. I would rather have interested third parties do the best camera apps, as opposed to Apple deciding they're going to do an all-in-one camera app that does all the things, including f-stop and aperture and so forth. The average user needs a functional app that will give them the best pictures possible with the least amount of intervention possible. So I'm concerned that if Apple decides to make the ultimate camera app, that it's going to detract from that main goal, which is photography for everybody.
Yeah, well, we still need that, the time from pocket to photo to be as minimal as possible.
It needs to be very quick.
And if you're cramming the UI with a bunch of junk, you've missed the photo. Especially if you're trying to adjust for everything or whatnot. You need to be able to pull that thing out, hit the button, and go. So I agree with you on that one. Maybe we need a pro camera app from Apple. Like maybe it could be exclusive to the pro phone hardware. That could be an incentive. It's hard to say at this point, but if Apple's going to introduce the hardware, the software, some sort of software on Apple's end is going to have to support it. They wouldn't introduce the sliding mechanisms and control over focus and all of that without having some of that in their own software. So it'll be interesting to see how they implement that.
Yeah, sure. You just don't want it on the front level to Mom and Pa America who just want to blast a picture of their kid.
Right. That's kind of like right now with the spatial video. If you go to the video app, it's a prominent button that you can accidentally click. Actually, I actually recorded this wasn't a critical video for the wedding, but I recorded someone's wedding, put it up on a tripod, climbed up there, set it up, made it capture the scene. It captured it in spatial, which was kind of cool in its own way, because we went back and watched it later and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's got this depth to it, but it made it this crunchy 1080p video instead of a beautiful 4K 60. Right.
Well, hang on there, Chief. A crunchy 1080p, huh?
You know what I mean. Like, so, especially in have you have a Vision Pro? How much spatial video have you recorded?
Almost none.
All right. So it introduces artifacts that isn't there in the crisp 1080p. So it's that's why I say, like, it's not quite this, like, obviously the iPhone can capture amazing 1080p. It's just different because it's doing that 3D.
It does, it needs better lighting is really what it needs. It does fine without the artifacts, without the noise, in a brighter environment.
And as long as it's not moving. If you're recording spatial video and you move very quickly or move very slowly, otherwise it's useless what you're capturing as you're moving. But it was interesting, but yeah, I would have preferred a 6 or a 4K version of that video, but the spatial was fine. We were outdoors and it was sunny, so it came out great. It's just, again, like it's so easy for your thumb to slap that button without you even realizing it, and by the time you're done, you now have a spatial video without even knowing it. Prominent UI like that can be very disruptive.
Yeah, I agree. It's this is complex, right? Because pro users want something different than everyday users, and my thoughts on this are complex, right? Obviously, because you can hear me kind of yammering through them right now. It's There will be no camera app, one universal camera app for everybody. There can't be.
Right.
There can't be one universal audio recording app for everybody. There can't be. There's no one universal desktop publishing app. There are easy ones and there are more complex ones like InDesign. So, and it needs to stay that way. The more stuff you cram into a tool, you get the Homer Simpson's car that he designed on that episode.
Right.
You know, where nobody is happy.
So I still, at least Apple's customers say so, and I think it's true. Photography is the most important part of a phone these days. It's just what people use the most, between not just FaceTime, but just cameras in general, taking pictures, those memories. I mean, I've been taking way more panoramic photos because Vision Pro makes them stunning and interesting. Mm-hmm. The 3D the 3D photo conversion is really cool. I wonder if we'll ever see, I mean, I think it's inevitable that we'll see a spatial video conversion, maybe, if the hardware gets good enough, or maybe the algorithm gets good enough. But all that said, I have a question. Have you used the Halide photography app at any point?
I have, but I don't need it. My photography needs are fairly modest.
Right.
You know, I am not Mom and Pa America blazing pictures of my kids, but I'm also not that much more advanced than them in that regard. That's why stories about iPhone photography I will not write. I know my limitations.
It's an interesting app. Like, for me, I'm avid hobbyist photographer, and I take photos of everything just because I enjoy having it. The journal app has amplified that. I want to document everything, and having those photos enhances every entry, and I want to do an entry every day because they're streaks now, so they've gamified it, of course. But the Halide app is interesting because they just came out with a new feature called Process Zero, where they remove all of the processing from the Apple.
I saw that.
Yeah. Now, so this is what's funny about it. So I've actually become more and more reliant on the iPhone camera app, just the base camera app. For whatever reason, they just do an excellent job. Apple has leaned into that realism of capturing what your eye sees, and they do it so well. Now, there are artifacts introduced in some situations. Maybe it's over sharpened because of that sweater mode, as people called it, but deep fusion. But this Process Zero, I think, if anything, I'm not that kind of photography nerd. I'm not out here shooting on film. I can see the appeal, but the thing that I've been doing with it is I'm just seeing how different a photo is without all that processing compared to with it. And sometimes it can produce better or just more pleasing images because some of the saturation is ducked and some of that noise is introduced. It almost gives it that Polaroid feel. And yes, I'm old enough to have had and used a Polaroid, but
just ironically, though.
No, of course, no. I grew up with one in the house, but in any case, it's just an interesting idea. But the iPhone processing goes so far, but at least it's not adding anything artificial. As I've mentioned in the last podcast, I'm planning a piece on getting back to discussing how Apple uses their, I guess we call it artificial intelligence, Apple Intelligence, including in their photography, and how Google and Android has been approaching it. And it just feels things are getting more and more fake. Just a little tangent. Have you seen some of the reviews of the Pixel AI image creation tools?
I have. It's, the last time I was on this podcast, I vented about artificial intelligence. I'm not sure I'm going to do that again on this one. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, on Pixel in general, the word fake just keeps coming to mind. And I can, so as a nerd, I can look at this and say, neat. This is a cool example of taking a technology and putting it to work and creating a flashy, like, showcase. But on the other side of that, I ask, who is doing this? Now, the image generator tool is a whole different question, right? There's Copilot, and people are playing with those. They're fun toys. They can make interesting images. We have a whole thing on Copilot kind of running away with trademarks, and it seems Google's version is doing the same. People are making very disturbing images of SpongeBob, for example. But the one that I'm most interested in, because it's in the photo application, the camera application, is their Magic Editor, where people are just adding objects and scenes to photos. And that one's just wild to me. Why would you fundamentally alter? Now, maybe for a quick meme or a joke, sure, I can see, like, obviously people have been altering photos for years using different tools, but it just feels like they're kind of suggesting you should do this all the time, like adding flowers to a field of grass kind of thing. And it's just like, that's not what it represents, though. That photo did not take that. That's not real. Maybe I'm the wrong person for this feature, but I've seen some really weird things.
That's the thing with AI, right? AI trains on AIs, and it's getting worse and worse and worse as time goes on. There's a big hallucination problem right now. There's going to continue to be a hallucination problem right now. And the thing is, though, with some of these pictures that we're seeing of copyrighted characters, do they really want Disney Legal to get involved?
Right.
That sounds like a really bad idea if you want to have a viable product.
I thought when we wrote about Copilot that it was going to, like, someone's going to be like, oh, man, we left a switch off somewhere. Let's go turn that back on. But, I mean, I know we're not, like, CNN or anything, but, like, it's still prominent enough. People pay attention. We get emails from these companies all the time if we put one word out of line about any of their companies. And we heard nothing from Microsoft about this. And that's just, I don't know. Seems almost intentional. They want people to be able to play with this stuff. I think maybe Mark Zuckerberg was the one who said this. I may be misattributing, but he said something along the lines of these new AI companies just need to learn that maybe it's not Mark Zuckerberg, but anyway, the quote was, whoever said it, these AI companies coming up need to just learn to steal everything and get big enough quickly so they can fight the lawyers on the back end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can't remember who said that, but it was...
No, I forget who said it.
It was such a... Oh, I'm sorry. It was... I think it was Google's ex-CEO, that guy.
Oh, right.
He's been on a...
Schmidt.
Yeah.
He was on Apple's board for a while, too.
Yeah, he's been saying a lot of weird things in an interview lately.
I mean, when you get old and you have God's own money, you can say whatever the hell you want.
Sure. But yeah, AI, I mean, people who listen to the show, my opinions are mostly just, there is a tool there, kind of like cryptocurrency, which still don't think we're using that type of technology correctly. Crypto's is fully a scam, but as it exists today. But like AI and all of this stuff, the stupid name that we use for it, is an interesting technology. There are uses for it, and I may be sounding like an Apple fanboy, but I'm still firm in the fact that I think Apple's doing it the right way. They're making humans do the work. And they just follow up with an editing tool. We still have to write the text. We still have to take the photo. Now, Apple's image generator is a whole different story, but we still don't know how that works yet, so there's nothing to say about it.
This episode is brought to you by 1Password, and I'm so pleased that it is, actually, because I love 1Password. It's been keeping my passwords, yes, but also bank account details, credit cards, software licenses, and even my secret document listing my clothing sizes. It's had all of them securely, safely, at my fingertips for something like 10 years, maybe more, during which time my clothing sizes have not got bigger around the waist, not one single inch, but 1Password has expanded. I just heard what I was going to say there. Okay, 1Password has expanded. It was always more, right, than a secure place for your passwords. I mean, it didn't need to be more. What it did and does for personal passwords, that's superb by itself. But it has always done more, and right now, it's protecting you further and you and your company with 1Password Extended Access Management. Whether it's your own staff bringing in their personal devices or it's contractors working with their own systems, not everyone you rely on is using the tools that you have to keep your company safe. There are reasons people use unmanaged devices, of course, or shadow IT apps, yes, but they're always a risk, or they were. With 1Password Extended Access Management, every user credential is strong and protected. Every device is known and healthy, and there are no hidden apps. 1Password Extended Access Management is now generally available to firms with Okta or Microsoft Entra, and it's in beta now for Google Workspace customers. Check it out at onepassword.com/product/XAM. That's digit 1Password, and XAM for Extended Access Management. onepassword.com/product/XAM. And thanks to 1Password for supporting both the Apple Insider Podcast and all my personal passwords, even when I've got a cold.
We can get a little more AI later if we need to. Just wanted to wrap up iPhone 16. So are you going to get a phone this year? The action button's for everybody now. Do you have an action button on your phone right now?
I do not. My main driver is an iPhone 13 Pro. I'm going to go most likely iPhone 16 Pro. I do have a work device that is I do not have with me when I need a camera, for instance. Right. That is a newer phone. That's an iPhone 15 Pro. So,
did you have to drill the cameras out so you could take it into confidence?
No, when I go into facilities that because as I've discussed before, I still maintain a security clearance, and I do periodically do some work. But no, there's phone lockers and so forth. Right. I have to strip off my watch and turn off my phone and put it in the locker, and no RF shall pass.
Right.
So,
well, that's exciting. That's a big upgrade from the iPhone 13 Pro. As weird as it is, you'll definitely, I think, notice the speed differences. But that camera, it's always the camera that is the most significant. Maybe you're not that much of a photographer, but it's just so stark, especially over a 2 to 3 year spectrum, how much it improves every time. But all right, so one last little thing. I had a question. Phones are just seemingly getting bigger. Ever since the iPhone 6 in beginning, it's just been a steady tick upwards. The iPad mini is, I believe, 7.9 inches. It's a different aspect ratio. The iPhone seems to be getting bigger again this year. And you're getting the smaller model, so obviously you don't want the absolute biggest phone. Is there a limit, you think, or is there a day that the standard phone could be the size of Pros today? Are people? I feel like people maybe are getting to that limit because they're saying the standard phones are maybe getting too big. But Apple kind of proved that wrong with the iPhone Mini that no one bought.
No one bought it. Yeah.
Right. So where are we with it? Maybe the foldable is the answer, right? If Apple actually goes for that gimmick, which I still think it's a gimmick. And releases a foldable that lets you open a screen and it be bigger. What's happening here? Are we just on this infinite curve?
Yeah, everybody says every year that the phone is so big, it can't possibly get any bigger. It's not practical to get any bigger, and then it does. So we've come a long way from the original iPhone, which before then was that indestructible Nokia, right? Which was more of a chocolate bar form factor as opposed to more of a slab. I think we've still got a little while for phones to creep up, right? But I don't think that they're... I think that if you're looking for a bigger screen, hugely bigger screen, obviously the iPad mini is next up. But that doesn't strictly have telephony. That's got FaceTime, right? So I can't imagine we're going to get much larger than another half inch on the high end, on the Pro Max side. But I also, on the other hand, don't think we're going to get a whole lot smaller. We're already talking about the iPhone 17 Slim or whatever the Air or whatever Apple decides to call it. But that's not, the screen isn't any smaller. It's just a thinner phone.
Right.
So
it takes me back to the iPhone getting, I believe this was the 5S, taller, not wider, right? That was their whole marketing campaign. Mm-hmm. And there's this fun meme that I'm going to have to get to William for the image art maybe, of Obi-Wan holding an iPhone that's just the size of a lightsaber, and he's for some reason, because memes are stupid, holding a shield that's just a giant Samsung phone. But that was
it's an old meme, but it checks out.
Yeah, it's taller, not wider, and we have kind of seen that the aspect ratio changes every couple of years to allow the phone to get a little taller. You can't reach the top corner unless you're a basketball player with your thumb anymore. It's kind of wild the direction phones are going. And closing on foldables before we move on, I think the best foldable form factor, I still haven't owned one. I want to play with one, but they're just way too expensive and fragile to bother. But I think the folding open to an iPad mini form factor is the best, but it seems Apple is going to the flip phone, which I'm nostalgic for flip phones. I owned the BlackBerry Pearl flip. That was cool. You could just open and shut it. It was a fun fidget toy. I wouldn't fidget with these phones. You might break them. But where do you land on that? Are you interested at all in a foldable?
No. Mm-mm. Physics are remorseless. you want to make something break, just bend that aluminum can back and forth about 15 times.
Right.
It's called fatigue failure, right? Not going to get into it too much. Wes and I both have practical experience on methods of failure of ductile materials. And, but yeah, it's just, I have seen a lot of Samsung flip phones, and they just all have that nasty crease right down the center of them. And I can't imagine where Apple would want any part of that.
Right. It's one of those things where Apple, they, for better or worse, they want to be the best designed, and they're going to stand on this pedestal of design and perfection. And their phones are sleek, unless someone, shatters it and then they walk around with a shattered phone, which please go get your phones fixed. This just screams in the face of that. Like, it's the opposite of Apple in every way. They're every compromise you make to try and make it more safe from dust sacrifices its durability as well. Like, they had the gap for a while where it wouldn't shut all the way except at the pinching point at the end. But then that just let a bunch of dirt in anyway, and then it just ground the screen to dust. If you let it shut completely, then you better make sure that there's nothing in there getting clamped. Then and again, that little hinge portion where the screen is going to be fully folded all the time, permanent crease. There's nothing you can do about it. And if they ever find some way to liquefy that section and make it a little bit more pretty, sure, but then you have a moving component in your expensive $2,000 iPhone that might need to be repaired once a year because you've opened it and shut it too much, right? That moving hinge is the most critical part of this, and it's the one most likely to break.
Well, I suspect it's more the screen glass than it is that hinge. But hinges are a solved problem, right? Humanity has had hinges figured out for like 3,000 years. A hinge is not novel. It's a precise hinge like this is something different.
Right.
But the greater engineering challenge is dealing with is repeated folds in that glass. So I just don't see it happening.
Right.
I mean, Apple is not super fond of you walking around with a broken screen iPhone anyway. We know this based on executive comments. They just want you to get your screen glass fixed, right?
Right.
But this is having an entire class of device that's going to have a seam running through it. I just don't see them really wanting to do that.
I've said this before. Apple has prototypes for everything in their lab. They have a prototype for that folding MacBook we keep talking about from patents. They probably have the next 3 version of Vision Pro and some sort of glasses with a projector, right? Everything is in that lab somewhere that we'll never see the light of day. Foldables just never took off. I mean, people seem to act like it's the Pixel phenomenon all over again. What were they called before? Google had a phone before the Pixel. I forget what they're called. It was a Google branded phone, but it wasn't called the Pixel. And then Google came out with the Pixel, and all the reports were Google's first phone, and it's just like, no, like there's like, yeah, oh, that's it, the Nexus line. But anyway, like, it feels like that again. Every year it's like, it feels like foldables are new again. It's like, guys, they've been trying to do this since 2016, I want to say. Maybe that's too early, maybe 2019. That time area is fuzzy for me. But in any case, a long enough time, and they're not taking off. People are buying them who have the money. This is kind of a Vision Pro problem, but I think the Vision Pro is a practical solution versus their foldables are kind of an impractical solution. I mean, the problem's clear. We want to have a bigger screen in our pocket. How do we do that? But I don't think it's the right solution. I think augmented reality, virtual reality type things. I think Apple spatial computing, the eventuality of glasses, a wearable that you keep on your face majority of the day, however long out that is, I think that's the end goal, and I think that could ultimately replace or at least augment the iPhone, this gargantuan thing in our lives. I mean, we'll never have another iPhone moment, but I think that's the closest thing we'll have to it. But
yep, I think so too.
I think we need to move on. iPhone 16. I mean, I'm excited. I'm on the iPhone upgrade program. I'll have the Pro Max. That's going to be a fun one for me. I just, more cameras. Let's go. But sports, a thing that we're both not passionate about.
So wait, hang on, Wes. Between you and I, why are we talking about this?
Okay, well, I had a tangent to go from here. So,
okay.
Okay, so I don't think either of us follow anything directly. I watch the Super Bowl. I like to see if Tennessee Volunteers win. Maybe I'll go turn the game on if there's literally nothing else to do, but it's just not something I care about. I don't even I can't even tell you the name of the starting quarterback. It's just it's not my thing. I like it for the social aspect of it, I guess. So I'll go hang out with people and be like, yeah, sports, woo. So Apple updated their silly sports app to allow for NFL and NCAA. It's like, yeah, we knew that was coming. Everyone was really upset for some reason when it released and didn't have the ability to go follow those teams. It was out of season. I don't know. All that aside, I wanted to discuss Apple's weirdness here. I think it's kind of a weirdness. I remember it's increased since, but there was a time when Apple had 32 pre-installed apps, and that was enough for regulators to say Apple is potentially monopolizing the home screen, and they should have other apps installed on their phone from third parties when they sell them, kind of like the Verizon app that is stealing everyone's data on Pixel or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that they don't do that. I mean, I know this is one of those weird antitrust things, but I think this is one of those decisions that was a good thing. Let users decide what to put on the phone. But Apple has over time added to that collection of apps. We got the sports app. We've seen Game Center come and go as an app. It's now a weird hidden menu in settings. Voice memos is now just part of Notes, even though it's still a separate app. I think the app might eventually go away or just be deprecated. Where do you land on this? Are you a big standard iPhone app user? Do you use a lot of third-party apps? And can you see, what's your preference? Do you want a lot of small apps that do one thing good, or do you like to have one big app that does everything?
So I'm Mac primary, and I am non-apologetic about it. The only reason why I wear an Apple Watch is my cardiologist says I probably should. The iPhone is a fine accessory to my Mac, and I understand that I am the exception rather than the rule. There are about 25 iPhone users to every Mac user. So I have always preferred single-purpose apps. Like the tool I use to crop images, that's all it does. It crops and rotates. End of story. It doesn't do anything else. Most of my writing is done in TextEdit. Just that text editor that macOS comes from, because it is an uncluttered writing experience, and I don't need anything else other than that tool to get the job done. So Apple's apps are fine. They get the job done. They should exist in the function that they do exist. And if a user finds a more full-featured weather app, like I use my Radar for my weather. I don't like Apple's weather app, even though it's got dark skies integration now. I picked that one because I prefer the presentation to it over Apple's app. So I don't have a problem with Apple having, I think it's actually 47 of its own apps now that go on the phone. But I'm flipping through my screen right now. I've got 11 or 12 pages of apps, and I can probably delete half of these.
Sure. So you're not an app library guy. You have all your apps out on the home screen.
Yeah, they're just scattered all over hell and gone.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. Most people aren't thinking about iPhone customization the way I do. I'm the weirdo here with like 10 focus modes and a bespoke home screen for each one. I don't know which one's more practical, but of course, to each their own. No, I'm with you. I mean, I don't know. I cycle between the two. Like, I look at Apple News, Stocks, and Sports. That's just one app. Why are they three different apps? Those could be tabs within the app. If you're interested in stocks, this is where customization comes in. If you're interested in stocks, make one of your tabs a stock tab. If you're interested in sports, make one of your tabs a sports tab. It's so annoying to me that the primary middle tab button in Apple News is sports. I will almost literally never click on that. Now, let me turn that into the puzzles button so I can launch the puzzles that they have in the News app. I would do that in an instant. That's great. It's just, why are they three separate apps? Versus Apple Notes, I love that it's just everything. I kind of think Freeform, it makes sense that it's its own thing, but maybe you should just be able to create a Freeform note inside of Notes, right? Why is Freeform its own separate app, right? I don't know how Apple makes these decisions or what teams it puts to work here, but it also is always this danger of Apple releasing something kind of like the sports app and it kind of just being left to die, so to speak. Do you remember the is it called song memos or music memos? That's it.
I really don't know.
No, exactly. I mean, it literally, they released it 1 year as that voice memos that everyone uses. We're releasing one for song recording, and then they just scrapped it like a year later. And I found that very, I found that very interesting that they even did it at all. It's just like, just use the voice memos app. Do you need a branded app? And I guess this gets back to user education, and maybe the Tips app is finally helping with that. We still haven't seen too many tip integrations, but anytime I do see one, I'm like, that's awesome, because people have no idea how any of this works.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But I don't know. I'm just a soft tangent there. Apple's strategy with this stuff has always been so odd to me. Apple Podcasts is another example of weirdness here. Why is Apple News Audio not able to communicate with Apple Podcasts? If I listen to something on Apple Podcasts, mark it as read in Apple News. If I listen to audio in Apple News, mark it as listened to in Apple Podcasts. It's a different backend, I'm sure, but they're the identical audio. So many of Apple's Apple Music shows and Apple News Plus programs are now in Apple Podcasts.
Uh-huh.
Just make them talk to each other. Why? They're the same company. I understand backends are hard, but like, guys, syncing was like your whole thing. Continuity was such a big deal back when it came out, but now there's so many parts of the Apple ecosystem that are completely disparate from each other. It feels funny to me. But is there any I guess I know the answer to this question because you're just generally not an iPhone user. I was going to say, is there any apps that you feel like are missing from Apple that they should be making?
Let me think about that for a minute. I mean, I don't think so. You've got your core down, right? You've got a spreadsheet app. You've got a music creation app. You've got a video editing app. You've got all these stocks apps. You've got podcasting. I mean, Apple's going to do what Apple's going to do, and they don't listen to us. I mean, they'll listen to feed. If we collate what readers are thinking about something and it's all universally negative, we're going to talk about it, obviously. But they don't consult us on anything. I think that Apple's existing apps are fine. I think that, like I said, I think that a user has the freedom to go on the App Store and go look for something different or look for a progressive web app to do it. So I don't have a firm opinion on combining any of these apps or breaking them up or making an Apple Omni app. Frankly, I think an Apple Omni app would drive the regulators absolutely batshit insane.
It would be, it would. I mean, look at the complexity of the Photos app over the years and this new customization option. I mean, I feel like 1% of users are going to bother rearranging any of those menus.
Probably.
If that. I mean, that might be generous. Because it's just not discoverable. I mean, I know there's a splash screen, but people are just going to click past it because they want to get to their photos. Yeah. They don't want to read an instruction manual. Which, again, education, how do you do it? It's such a problem on any of these platforms. People just don't want to stop. Every time you're trying to... That's the issue. Every time they're trying to educate you on something, you're already trying to do something. You don't have time to deal with whatever this pop-up is. You're just going to skip past it. Mm-hmm. I mean, my suggestion, I suppose, I like Google's screenshots system that they're coming up with, having a separate tool for that. I mean, Apple's Screenshot is already technically a separate app. If you look at macOS, I believe Screenshots is an app.
It is, yeah.
So it's almost already that on iOS. It's such a built-in utility, but they litter your Photos app. So having a separate repository for that would be kind of cool. Just, stuff like that. If I had to pick something that Apple isn't doing right now that they were more in the past, I would say extensions. I want more things that plug into things. That was the coolest thing in the world to me, having the ability to build an app that just basically adds a feature to something else, right? A photo editing tool showing up in Photos that isn't normally there, or maybe integrating with the Notes app in some unique way would be interesting. But I don't know. iOS is so mature at this point. We're just spitballing here. What can you actually do to change this platform? And I think, what is it? Every year now we keep seeing people call for a complete iOS 7 style redesign. Do you think we'll ever see something like that again?
Nothing as radical as that. It's tweaks and modifications and pinches and stretches. There's not going to be another major redesign like that anytime soon.
So speaking of redesigns, we've seen what happens when one goes bad. Sonos has been having a terrible, no good, very bad month now. I don't know how long this is. It's been quite a debacle. Yeah,
It's been about 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Basically, I actually do you use Sonos products?
Yes and no. I have some of the IKEA Sonos products in the house, but those aren't really reliant on the Sonos app. They AirPlay just fine.
Yeah, I converted to being HomePod only for better or worse. Probably a year ago at this point, in the anticipation that I don't know why, I can't tell you now. Maybe I should have written it down, but I was getting signals that I wasn't going to want to use Sonos anymore. I'm not saying there was anything serendipitous, but it was just almost kind of luck that I left when I did, because the company's kind of struggling, and I have a feeling like Amazon's probably going to buy them at some point. It's just the inevitable point. They were once the company Apple was supposed to buy to make Apple TV audio great, and the Sonos system is still amazing speaker technology. They've just, I don't know what they've done, but they've kind of ruined the software stack, as far as I can understand. I don't have the app, I don't know, but they've even had to delay products because the app has gone so poorly with this redesign. They even considered releasing the old app again, but then they came back and said, you know what, actually this makes the problems worse. We're not doing that. They're in such an odd hole we don't see very often with these larger companies, these successful companies. Kind of reminds you how wild it is that Apple doesn't have these kinds of things more often. There's so many signals bopping around my house right now from HomePods and Apple TVs and HomeKit products that I'm surprised we don't have just a complete meltdown. Now, that said, I know like Andrew's house was destroyed by a HomeKit update last year, so to be fair, but they did recover within relative swiftness. This is just going on, isn't it? This is kind of wild.
It is the easiest thing in the world to get a significant portion of your user base to test your new software. And for whatever the reason, Sonos decided to not do that. They decided to eat their own dog food, right? They picked yes people, and they picked their biggest fans to test that software who could do no wrong. You know, as far as the people who were testing were concerned, Sonos was great. Nothing could ever dim their vision of it, right? So, and that's the flaw. And the CEO said something to that effect too. He said that, you know, they need to get more outside input when they do software updates and things like that nature. But the problem is now the damage is done.
Right.
The damage is completely done now, and it's going to take.
The goodwill's
going to be gone for a long time, and there has to be an absolutely incredible app coming out to fix this problem, and it doesn't sound like it's coming out anytime soon. It sounds like it's going to be incremental changes for the next quarter.
This is one of those situations where I think the solution's going to be they're going to just dump part of their user base. They're going to say these products are no longer supported because we can no longer keep using the app. It'll keep working, but we're going to remove them from future updates, basically, in order to fix this issue, which is, you know, awful. It might kill the brand.
It might.
So it's just an interesting thing to see in this space. As I actually remembered why I moved away from Sonos. So I bought a system, my first one, for it was the living room setup, the ungodly expensive soundbar, subwoofer, rear speakers. So it was a 5.1 system. Even then, this was 2015. Even then, in the forums, official employees from the PR, we are working on adding 7.1 channel support.
Yep.
It was new to the industry relatively at the time. Atmos hadn't come out yet. 5 years go by, we're still working on it. 8 years go by, we're still working on it. Here's this new Atmos system. By the way, Atmos is just in the soundbar. You kind of get it when you add a couple more speakers, but it's not true Atmos. And adding more than just the 5 bass speakers, still not possible. And that was just a big red flag. Just the empty promise. It just felt like, say you're not going to do it if you're not going to do it, right? Because I would have killed for that, right? It made sense. These speakers are amazing, and having some side speakers to accompany the back ones, or maybe Sonos ceiling, or maybe throw in some of those fancy IKEA picture speakers or whatever, could really fill a room more. It's not like I need a movie theater, but it does make a difference. I've had 7.1 channel in the past, and it's interesting what it can do with sound when it's there. Atmos completely transforms that, of course, by making the sound fill the room better, but every speaker needs to support it. So I moved to HomePods, and now I'm still banging the drum. Apple, make it happen. You can do it. I'm sure you can. Maybe it'll require new hardware. I don't care. I will buy it. I will put 4 HomePods in the room, 1 in each corner, and have them Atmos the sound in my direction. That would be amazing. And I at this point, it feels inevitable that Apple's going to do something silly with their audio home units. But at least it feels like Apple's making forward progress. We're hearing about this robot thing that is going to have some sort of speaker attached to it. Who knows? I'm sure you're not even in the slightest interested in that.
No.
I take it.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm just the nerd who likes everything. So, of course, I'm going to have one in my house the minute I can. But this Sonos just feels like such a faceplant. I don't know. I don't think they can recover. But anyway, I wanted to, last little topic here, cover a couple of things Apple's doing. So Beat Studio got some the Apple Music audio sharing. Or I actually, not the Apple. This is a separate thing. This is like AirPlay, but Bluetooth audio sharing, where you can have multiple people connect to a single source on a phone and both hear them in separate sets of headphones. That's cool. That brought to mind a different feature Apple has been kind of slowly rolling out with Apple Music. I still feel like no one's really talking about to that much of an extent. I think it's kind of a game changer if you're in the kind of environment where it's going to be useful. And I'm in that environment. Usually I have so many nieces and nephews. I usually have carloads of people running around doing things. So last year, Apple introduced the ability to scan a QR code and everyone join your Now Playing session in the car. Mm-hmm. Perfect implementation. I don't think anyone talks about it, but like it is such a big deal, giving everyone this opportunity to kind of gamify the Now Playing list. Everyone in the car can join. You can see who's playing the song on CarPlay on the phone. You can see the up playing next with a personal icon next to each song. It's such a cool idea, and I'm happy they're bringing it to pretty much everything that can support it in iOS 18. What do you think of that feature?
I think it's a cool feature. I've allowed my children to test it in the car. I don't care for what I get, but they seem to have a good time doing it.
Right. Yeah, my niece and nephew, they're 16, 17. Their taste in music is
not the same.
Interesting
as yours,
to say the least. Yeah. I often get told by them that when I'm playing music, it sounds like it could be heard in an American Eagle, which I kind of take as an insult because I think it's at least a little more eclectic than that. But
okay.
My goodness, no, they're brutal. But yeah, this is really cool. We've been testing this at home with HomePods. You can just jump into the HomePod Now Playing network if you're not part of the AirPlay session. Yep. Or even more cool, the new Beats Pill. I went and picked one up. You can join the Now Playing session in that. So we were having kind of a picnic the other day with a bunch of friends, and they were able to just jump in and add their own songs to the playlist. It's just such an interesting feature. Someone tell me if Spotify does this in any way at all. There's probably something there. It sounds like something Spotify would do, but I wanted to mention it if only because it feels like no one knows it's there or that it's coming. It's just such a sleeper hit. I just wanted.
We wrote about it a while ago. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I want to see Apple do more stuff like this. It just reminds me of that continuity of devices, this ecosystem, and sharing the shareability of everything in Apple now. I think goes under the radar, but we're planning a wedding and we have like a shared note for different things, or we even have a shared Apple Music playlist for adding songs to what would essentially be the wedding playlist. All of these shared departments in Apple all across their ecosystem is just interesting, and I hope Apple keeps making these useful and possible and whatnot. Like the SharePlay stuff is just out of this world. It would have been great if we had it, I don't know, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's here now, and it's only improving as things go on. And obviously, as we mentioned before, Apple Vision Pro makes a really interesting use of it with spatial personas. I can see this kind of technology growing into different stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Apple has a interesting ecosystem of features, and I think obviously the more they can tie those together, the better, especially with sharing. Social is so important to all of this, but we'll see. WWDC's already come and gone. iPhone could have some cool new stuff. Who knows? I like the tapping to share contacts. Like that kind of stuff's just really cool to me.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get out of here. I think that's a show we can wrap up this week. I want to thank our sponsor, 1Password, once again. And where can people find you on the internet, Mike?
Well, I'm on Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it these days, at Mike_Worthley, or at Apple Insider every day.
Yeah, still not a Mastodon guy.
No, still not a Mastodon guy.
We may convert you
Nope.
yet. I know, no, of course. Well, I'm also on Mastodon, and of course, any article you see with our name at the top, you click that name, it opens an email draft. You can email us anytime about the show with any questions you might have, or angry comments about something we might have said that was silly. Of course, send it our way. If you are a premium subscriber, you get an ad-free show and Apple Insider Plus. And this week, William is going to be talking to you about how to buy an iPhone. So if promise it makes sense when you go listen to it, it's going to be a good one. William will be back, I believe, next week with me to talk. And I think with that, we'll get out of here. Talk to you guys next week.
So long, everybody.